So, what are you seeing? Is it the presentation or an empty screen?
I see your presentation.
Okay, so what do you think about the font size? Is it okay for the presentation? And here on the right side, I have some kind of terminal, right? I won't go into the details of what I'm using, but this terminal emulator. So the important point is that the font size is appropriate, yes? So if it is not, just scream here or write it on the chat, although I cannot see my chat in a proper way. Where can I put this thing here? Okay, we'll put this here. Yeah, just let me know if something is not going well here. So yes, I will start with the remotes, right? We will see what is this concept in more detail. So remote, I took this definition from the book ProGit from Scott Chacon and Ben Strop. So remote repository is a version of the project which can be hosted in your local machine, some network or over the internet. Yes, notice these different ways where you can set your repository and where you and your collaborators can push or pull code modifications. So more on these two words will be given in the coming slides. So in addition to this, the remote is a way to back up your repository. Yeah. So because maybe you are comfortable with the repository that you have set, yes, with the basic concepts that we have covered up to now, yes, git init and git commit, git add, and then the repository is maybe in your local machine. But imagine that some coffee is spilled on the machine, right? So then it is damaged and you lose your entire repository, your entire work from months, maybe from years, right? So in that way, setting a repository in some other place can help you to back up the code that you have written over some period of time. Yeah. So in addition to doing this backing up process, it can be used to collaborate with other people. Here, for instance, I have 3 persons, right, that are collaborating in some work. And in the old days, right, so there were also other version control systems. But the problem, or one of the problem, yes, that they have is that the copies of the repositories that each person got was not entirely the same, right? It was not the same for each of them. So sometimes people could get branches, or sometimes people could get only partial parts of the repository because it was not easy to get the full history, the full project, right? It was tedious, yeah, but Git solved this issue, and now all the collaborators can get exactly the copy of the repository. So here I pasted some of the possible servers that you could use. Bitbucket, there is also GitHub. Maybe you have used GitLab, or you are aware of GitLab, right? So these are some servers that where you can place your repository, or even you can set your repository in some local machine in your department, for instance. So then all the people can get exactly the same history, the tree, the exact repository, yes, and then even if the remote server breaks, right? So then all the persons have a copy of the repository, and then that can help you as an additional way to back your code, right? Your repository. In the first lecture, I covered this slide, this picture, and I mentioned that this is a graphical way to see what the commands are doing in Git. And there was some mistake if you take a look at the video. So here it was git clone, but not, it's not git clone. I made a mistake, right? It's a git add. So I copy and pasted some of these lines, and I was not aware of that mistake, but here there should be some git add, right? So, but the important point now is that the first 3 days of this course, including this morning, we were looking at the local repository, right? Something that you can set, for instance, in your local machine. And now we'll start seeing the remotes, right? That is a copy or some repository that is located in a different place. It can be also your local machine, but the point is that you will get a copy of that repository, right? So then we will take a look at the different commands that we use to interact with this remote repository, right? And see how we can get a copy and put some changes and get some changes from it. So, okay, let me start with the simple thing. So first of all, we need to see what are the repositories that are available, or what are the remote repositories that they are available in our current repository. So there is a command called remote -v, and this will give you the information of the repositories that are available for your current repository. So in particular, if you clone the repository, yes, from some repository online or any other server, then it gets by default this remote called origin, also by default. And if you take a look at the output of the remote for a clone repository, then you will see that in the origin, you can fetch, which means that you can get the changes from the remote. And also in the origin, it says that this is the remote that is set where you can push, yes, some modifications. You can put some modifications in the remote repository. But notice here that you can only do this if you have permissions to do that. Yeah. And one particular way to have or to get permissions is by setting your SSH key. And also if you have access, or the person that is the owner of this project gives you access to put changes. Fetching changes can be done if the repository is public, for instance, and but pushing changes is in general not allowed. So you need to be allowed to that particular project to push the changes. And here I have some test repository. This is my own account. And this is a GitHub platform, yes. And there are other platforms that you can use to put your code. It depends on what you prefer, right? And here you can see the repository is called my first repo, the one. And there is a button here that is in red color. And here there are some options. If you go to local, right, there are some options that you can use to clone the repository. Clone means that you will get exactly the copy of the repository as it is at this point, yes, in time, in the server. So here I can go and copy, yes. And this is basically what you did if you follow some instructions, yes, when you clone the exercises and the materials for this course. So here I can go to my terminal and type, for instance, git clone. Then, yes, it was cloned. Then I can do this. You can see that the repository is already here, right? So I can go to this, my first. And if I type git remote -v, then you will see that I got this repository from this online copy. Yes, this is the URL. And here, this is an option for getting the changes and also for pushing the changes. But I can only do that if I have access, yes, to that repository, and I have permissions to send commits, right? And this can only be done if you are the owner of the project. So by default, this is called origin, and this is the repository that this is set if you clone the project. So if you start with a brand new project, yes, for instance, imagine that I can type here mkdir, my first repo, without any any slash. It is a different project, right? And then here I start my project with git init, something that we did before. And I start some commit message. Well, I can do here, I will not commit anything. I will just do git remote -b. And you can see here that because it's an empty repository, that I don't have any remote set as in the case of the clone repository, right? So, okay, so if you do git graph, then I will move to the previous one that I clone, right? If I do here some git graph, so you will see different things than the ones I saw before, yes, in the previous lectures, because there we noticed that we had the head, yes, pointing to some branch, right? And in this case, it's pointing to the branch main. But now there are other options, right? For instance, here, besides the head, now we have the origin, which is our remote. Yes, that is by default set when I clone. And we can see here main, right? The main branch in the origin, and also the head in the origin remote, right? So at this point, these are all synchronized, right? But once you start modifying the main, for instance, if you start committing something, then you will see that they are not at the same point, so they will be asynchronized, right? And you can get this information from the git graph command. In addition to this, because I have other branches in the origin remote, you will see here that they are also listed, right? And here is a branch called patch1, for instance, right? That is present in the remote, but is not listed here. So you can see this information with the grid graph command. So, okay, so we have seen now, yes, that we have a remote, right? And this is the remote by default origin, but we can also add some remotes, yes, in addition to the one that we have. Or if our project is empty, for instance, and we want to add some remote, it's also possible. So this can be achieved with the git remote add and the name of the remote that you want, right? And also here you specify the location, yes? So here we have some remotes here added. So we have seen that before, right? And notice here that if you add, yes, some remote, then there needs to be the so-called parent commit, right? So that the remotes are equal or similar at some point in the history, right? So if you try to add a remote that has not a similar parent commit, then it means that the histories are unrelated, and then you will need to do some manual modifications, right? So that the Git is aware that you are not mixing two repositories that are completely different, right? Or at least that you are aware that the remotes can be merged somehow. Yeah. So that's why here I have an origin. Yes. I could add this repository here, but it will get some conflicts, right? Because they are not equal. So something that I can do is that I can go to the project that is empty, right? And here I can add this remote here, right? And when you type git remote -b, then you can see that we have a remote called remote name, because I didn't change it. I should have changed that. But it got a default name, remote name, right? And it is pointing to this online repository. So here I can fetch or push, right? Or I can fetch the changes and also put the changes in the remote repository. So this is the way to add an repository, right? And in this case, it's convenient because I had an empty repository. But be aware, if you have already some work in a repository and you try to add a repository, then there will be conflicts because the histories are unrelated. Yes, Thomas.
Why would you prefer to do git add remote compared to git clone?
Yeah. This is just to illustrate what git add remote is, right? But yes, sure. If you have an existing repository on GitHub, GitLab, or any other server, they just clone it, right? So it will be clearly in the next slides why I am adding that manually. There are some protocols that are supported by the online servers, right? And or the servers for getting the remotes. And one of them is the local protocol when, for instance, you set your project in some path in your server, right? For instance, here, I set the project in the OPT directory. It's called project.git. Then I can use git clone, right? Or your colleagues can git clone it. Then there is a SSH protocol where you can clone via SSH if you have some server, right? Or also the HTTP. That is something that I used before when I cloned the previous repository. And also the Git repository that is more specific. So we have seen these different types of cloning. when you have this HTTPS, SSH, and this is required for, that's why you require here an SSH key, and we ask you to do that, because otherwise you won't be able to push changes in the repository. And also there is an option for the GitHub command line interface. So these are protocols, or some of the protocols supported. So why do we need more than one remote? It's yes, it's completely correct what Thomas mentioned. So why do we need to add it manually? If we can clone, yes, we can clone it, and we will get the origin default, and that would work if we have access, right, to the repository, and we can put modifications on the repository. But sometimes we are working, or we just got a copy, yes, of one repository, and the developers are not aware that we exist, or we don't have access to that repository. We cannot push, or we cannot put modifications directly on that repository, right? So we just got a copy, and in that copy we can put our modifications, right? This is illustrated in this picture here. So imagine that you are the user here, Alice, yes? And Alice took a copy from an existing repository. The copy is called now a fork, right? So Alice took a copy of the Bob repository, and here Alice has rights or permissions to put modifications, right? And this is the origin repository. This is what you get when you clone, yeah? So now Alice get a clone, right? And Alice can put changes and get changes from this repository. But Alice doesn't have permissions to write on this repository. But imagine this situation where Bob is still working on the repository, right? This developer is continuously updating the repository, and because Alice, right, is working on this repository, Alice won't be aware of the changes that Bob is making, right? If this repository is not connected, yes, to the repository where Alice is working. Is it clear?
No, I don't get that. I mean, if Alice forks the repo from Bob by cloning that, can't you see? What she can see is everything that happens in Bob repos, though. Then.
No, well, I can maybe I can show you here. Let me see. So, for instance, here is a repository, yes, from Bob, yes. This is the user, Bob user 2020. So then here in the GitHub page, notice here that this is my account, right? It's not the Bob account. I don't have access to this one, yeah. So here I can go and click on this button, right? And this will fork the repository from Bob. Yeah. So now you can see that in my account, I have a copy or the so-called fork from Bob's repository, right? But I have only permissions to put commits on this repository. But if Bob keeps working on his repository, I won't see those changes unless I have a way to get those changes.
Okay, now I see. So the fork is sort of totally detached from the original repo that you forked from.
That is correct. You need to somehow update the changes because here is just Bob has permissions to put changes, and you can if you copy at this point and don't synchronize the changes, they will become asynchronous. Okay, I hope this is clear. Let me know if there is some comments that I can make. And this is a simple situation, right? Because in the world of developers, in reality, there could be some central repository which is not needed. It can be spread across different research group, for instance, if the project is very big. And then they could have a different copy, right? This is an upstream, but there could be several. So if you want to get, for instance, the changes from one research group, that you could add, besides the upstream, you can have upstream 1, upstream 2, upstream, and so on, right? Depending on what changes you want to fetch and what features from the project you want to try. So this situation, it's simple, but it can be more complex in the real world. So this is the point why we need more than one remote, right? And how can we add more remotes? I have shown you before how can I do it. And the way to do that is by using the git remote upstream and the name that you want to give to the repository. So I did it previously with the git add. You can see that I name it by mistake a git remote name, and this is in this URL. I can also add this one, yes, for Bob. Right, I will do it. Oops. It wasn't copied through properly. Okay, it was added, and then if I check the remotes, you can see that now there is the Alice called remote name. This was my mistake. And here's the upstream from Bob. Oh, sorry, I did it incorrectly. Oh, well, I added both with the same user. So I can rename that, but I can show you later on. So the point is that here you can add more remotes, right? And there you can fetch and push depending on where you want to get changes and put changes. Yeah. So now if you take a look at the Git graph, yes, let me see. Okay, so I haven't fetched anything. So I don't have here the commit tree, because if you remember, this was an empty repository, right? And this is where I added manually the changes. Sorry, the remotes. But now, if you in the repository type git graph and you added some remotes, then you will see that besides the head main, you have upstream, yes, main, which is the one that you added, and also the default origin that was cloned, right? So I think I can do it. Oh, was it this one? Sorry. No. Let me do a git clone. Okay, so what I did now was to clone the repository from Alice. And this is called my first project, right? And here I have some commits already. And then I can add the remote from Bob. So if you take a look at git remote -v, you will see that the origin is from Alice because it was cloned. And then I can add the upstream from Bob this time, not Alice. Okay, let me see. It's correct this time. Okay, now if I check git remote -b, you will see both remotes, the origin from Alice and the upstream from Bob. And if now I do the git graph, then you can see the head, the origin, right? And something happened here.
Don't you need to pull maybe?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, git pull. Oh no. Okay, yes, that's correct. I just added the upstream repository, but it doesn't bring the branches from the server. I still need to get them with the pull command. I will mention that right now. So then when I type the git graph, so you can see the changes from the upstream remote. Yeah. So just by adding the remote, it doesn't bring the repository, yes, from the server or from the place that you have. It just make a reference to that. You need to get the changes explicitly with the pull command. Thank you, Thomas. I think it was Thomas. Yes, this is what I did exactly. Yes, one can push or fetch, pull from the remotes by using this command, git push, the name of the remote. So in this case, that I did was git pull, yes, and git pull, the name of the remote and the name of the branch, but by default, it will get all the branches, right? And if you don't specify the branches, then it will get the entire tree, right? All the branches in the remote. So these are basically the commands that you can use to interact with the remotes. So if you don't specify the name of the remote, it will take the default one, which is origin. But if you want to specify the remote where you want to fetch or pull, you should write it here. Here is what I just said. You can, if you clone the repository, then you will have the origin, and then instead of writing git push origin master or the name of the main branch, you can just put git push, and it will take as a default the origin and the name of the master of main branch, right? Also in the other commands. But you can be more explicit if you have some specific branch or some specific upstream remote. So now let me discuss this command, git pull, and let me see how I am in time. 10:55. Okay, so maybe we can take a break. What do you think? Let me see. I cannot see the. Do you want a break now?